I guess I just as well start at the where we are now. The beginning is I don't know when. We are in a new home. We are selling our home. Riley and Michaela have been living in it since January, getting it ready for sale. Uh, so we've been back in Idaho for 2 weeks, and we started looking for a house to buy for when ours sold. Still hasn't sold. And then we'd look for an apartment so we'd have a place to live and get out of Josh's basement, be on our own like we would like to be. And every house and every apartment that becomes available is rented almost faster than it comes onto the market. And last Wednesday night I said to Carrie, maybe we need to consider a motorhome, and she said, that's what I've been thinking.
Let's look tomorrow.
So I'd been online looking a little bit, and she got online looking a little bit, and we found something that was in a price range we wanted to pay, and we went by to look at it, and it was sold. They sold it last week, they said. But we have another one you could look at. So they took us to show us a newer one, and it was $150,000, and we looked at it and sat in it, and
we liked it.
Carrie says, I could live in this. And I says, you sure? She says, yeah. And the salesman said, well, what price range were you looking at? And we said, well, under 25,000 is where we'd like to buy. But we looked at this one, it was so nice, we thought, well, if we sell the house, maybe we could do it. And he says, well, sounds like you have some time, keep checking. We get more in all the time. He says, usually our lot's full, but he says, we got 200 spaces empty here. He says, since the first of the year, people have been buying camp trailers and motor homes like they're going out of style. And he says, March and April, we couldn't get any new ones. But now they're starting to come back a little bit. So we went and got lunch and went out to Bish's. And the young man finally got with us, and we told him what we were looking for. He says, I got one out here you should look at. So he took us out and we looked, and it was only had 74,000 miles on it, and it was only $34,000, and it was a diesel engine and
good condition.
Good condition for such an old motorhome. And so we sat and talked and looked through it all, and Carrie says, I could live in this. And I says, are you sure? And she says, yeah. She says, could you? And I says, yeah, I think I could. So that takes us back to when we were first married. We had been on our honeymoon, and it was still winter when we got back to Idaho at the end of February. So we went downstream to Hagerman and Twin Falls area to look at to find some warmer weather and where it was closer to spring. And we got in our first big argument that day. Carrie says, when we retire, we could get a motorhome and we could just travel. We wouldn't need a house. And I says, no way, I'm not gonna have a garden. But here 27 and a half years later, we're still tiptoeing around that when we decided maybe we better put some money down to hold that motorhome so somebody doesn't buy it out from under us. And when we got out of the dealership, we decided we should buy it. The salesman went to the back to talk to the money managers and took our information back, and they checked our credit and what they could do and told us how much, and we said we think we'll buy it. We went and talked it over, and we said we'll buy it. And they told us they'd have it ready for us on Friday at 3. So we drove it to Josh's and started putting stuff in it and couldn't get the air conditioning to work good. So we slept in his basement. But last night we slept in our own home. And it's parked out by our old house. And we're hooked up to water and still trying to figure out how to get the electric hooked up. We probably could do it, but maybe we'll just use it's got a diesel generator as part of the package that we can turn on, and it runs everything and charges the batteries up and just uses fuel out of the more than 50-gallon diesel fuel tank. So that's what we're doing. That's the current history. Oh.
Sorry.
Riley and Michaela just came in.
Eddie.
And the dogs always get really excited when Michaela comes because she works at PetSmart and understands how to take care of them. I met Carrie when I worked with her first husband Steve at the Idaho Falls Temple. I was married to Connie then, and we worked together. I worked together with him, and I met Carrie when she came over at lunch one day to see Stephen at work, and
Was pregnant with Nikki.
how about that?
Barely.
And so over the years, he and I became backpacking buddies. We went backpacking together some, and I knew him. And when his kids were blessed, I went to the blessings, and I knew him all along. And then when Connie and I got divorced, I needed a place to stay because I didn't have a place. So I asked him if I could come stay, and he said sure. We've got a bedroom in the basement, and I went and stayed there and rode my bike to work. It was just a little closer than my house to the temple, and he didn't work for the temple anymore by then, and then after a couple of months I found an apartment house to buy, and I moved into an unfinished basement apartment, and kept working at the temple for the next 2.5 years. It was right across the street from the temple, so I could walk to work and go home for lunch if I wanted. While I was one night, we were sitting there talking, and I don't know where Stephen was, but Carrie come in and sat down, and she says, I talked to an attorney, I think I'm getting a divorce. And I said, well, I'm getting out of here then. So for the next 2 years, I couldn't date her. In fact, I'd invite one or the other of them to go to the singles activities, and I would just say, now this is not a date, this is not a date. And so we had not a dates off and on, and a bunch of singles that got together and decided to go camping, and Stephen went with us. He was with us, and he brought his 2 kids, Nikki and Josh, and we camped, and there were, I don't know, 2 or 3 guys and 3 or 4 ladies, and we camped and hiked and went fishing, and then when we got through camping, Stephen had me drop him off with his kids at his one of his friends out in Lost River. We were just up the Lost River a ways, up one of the creeks above the Lost River Reservoir, and I dropped him off, and he went and stayed with his friends, and I drove back to Idaho Falls and Carrie called and says, "Where's my kids?" And I said, "Well, I left them with Steve and Robin out in Lost River." And so I went over. I had a video I wanted to watch. I didn't have a VCR, so I went over and watched the video, and I got through part of it. And she come in, and they had a big poof pillow, and I was laying on that poof pillow, and she lay down beside me, and I had been dated a lot of women by then, and had one relationship that I thought was going somewhere and had broken my heart, and I was just ready to get involved again in the dating game. And she lay down there, and I looked over and I thought, I think maybe this is what I've been looking for. I wouldn't see because I wouldn't date her. And there was an event coming up. The singles were going to Pierre's Playhouse, and I asked her to go with me, and she did, and we were just mostly inseparable after that. I was at her house, or she was at mine, or we were out to a dance or to an activity or something almost every night, weren't we?
Yeah, and you ate at my house almost every night.
She's a good cook. Didn't have to worry about that. By the time I had gotten my own apartment, I realized she was a really good cook. Didn't hurt.
Yeah, and the whole time we were dating, he kept saying, "I gotta date other women." At least twice a week when we were together, he'd tell me that. And I told him, "Well, then do it." But he never did. But he kept talking about it. And neither one of us had our kids that Christmas before we got married. And so we put a puzzle together on Christmas, wasn't it? And he kept, that night he said, I gotta date some other women. And by that time we dated constantly since August, and I was frustrated. So I went over to my mom's and said, I don't know what to do with him. If he doesn't propose or do something, I'm gonna quit dating him. And I was upset because I loved him by then. And then he invited me to the New Year's dance. You can tell how that happened, what you did.
Dare I?
Yeah.
Yeah, I put together a PVC pipe with some synthetic flowers in the ends of the pipes, and then I had a milk carton and I taped that to the other end of the pipe, and when I'd stomp on it, those blossoms would just pop out of that PVC pipe all over the place. I rigged that up under the tree out in my front yard, and on the way to the dance, which was just across the street at the Stake Center by the temple, I said, "Here, come here." So I went and sang the Sweetheart Tree, and when it comes to the part where big blossoms of white will burst into sight, I stomped on that milk carton and nothing happened, so I stomped again, and they flew out. We went to the dance and spent the evening, and then at midnight, after all the noise was over and my lips were free, I asked her to marry me. And she says, "Yes, can we go somewhere warmer?" So we planned a honeymoon to go south, and we went to St. George, and that was pretty warm, and we went to Las Vegas for a couple of days, and that was a little nicer, and we went to Tucson for most of a week, or maybe longer, and then when we drove home. Carrie had 2 kids that were with her, and Chanel was married by then, and Lambert and his wife were dating steadily by then, and so there were just 3 kids at home, and they'd been coming on every other weekend to be with me. During the daytime, they always went home at night. And so after we talked it over, we thought about it, and decided we'd like to move to Tucson. So in August, well, I guess it was in
July.
June.
Yeah.
In June, we took her kids up to meet her dad. Their grandfather was living in North Dakota, and they went and stayed with him for 3 or 4 weeks. And we started packing stuff up and getting ready to sorting through stuff so we could move. And then we drove to North Dakota and picked them up and come back through the Black Hills and saw Mount Rushmore and the Crazy Horse Monument and a woodcarvers museum in the Black Hills. Came through Yellowstone Park and home, but then we lived in my basement apartment. It was a 2-bedroom apartment. Josh slept on the sofa where he could see the temple at night. Nikki had the back bedroom, and Carrie and I had the master bedroom, and we lived there until we moved. Neither one of us had a job. I quit my job at the temple, and Carrie went and found a job. Now, well, we didn't find a job right away. I come back to Idaho to finish selling the apartment house and get a few things and get things arranged so that we could take up life anew in Tucson. We had called ahead, and a apartment rental agency found us an apartment. So Carrie was there for 3 weeks while I was back in Idaho, and then I went to see Ben while we were here. As I was leaving Ben's house, Theron had ridden up with me. We'd spent 2 or 3 days over the Labor Day weekend, and a young guy was coming up the road at windy gravel road at about 45, 50 miles an hour, and I saw him coming and moved clear over onto the shoulder and into the willows that were on the edge, and he was going so fast that the tail end of his pickup slid over and hit the front end of my Jeep and caused a lot of damage. And I remember the first thing that happens, he got out and he says, "You were going a little fast there, weren't you, buddy?" And I says, "Maybe so, but I was on my half of the road." And then he was really sorry, and he says, "Well, I got a buddy that can fix that." He says, "Let's just take it up to what was the town? Anyway." I says, "Well, I've headed back to Arizona tomorrow, and I haven't got time to wait and have it fixed." Still ran, so we went and called the cops, so we had a police report, so I could get my insurance to pay for it. Cop wouldn't write anybody a ticket because there was no white line to know who was over the road too far, what direction. But he says, turned to me and he says, "I'm not writing any tickets for traffic infractions." He says, "You're all right to go." He says, "But he doesn't have current tags on his license plates, and he doesn't have insurance." He says, "So before he gets through, he's going to pay a lot more than a fine." And so we got that fixed, and then we spent the next 8 years in Tucson.
And they were quite eventful. We got Jonathan and Riley.
Jonathan and Riley were both born in Tucson, 2.5 years apart. And then we missed Idaho. What we found is that every time we had vacation, we drove back to Idaho and spent 4 days on the road getting there and back, and then we could spend whatever amount of time we had in the meantime, and it gets too hot there in the summer. So we moved back to Idaho and built a house and raised Riley and Jonathan in a new house. We bought a little manufactured home. Well, it wasn't real little, but we were there for 4 years, and then we started to build our own home and rented the other one until we sold it. Had 3 acres. I wanted to have a hobby farm. Truck farm is what I thought I was going to have, and finally I got plowed up and planted, and that was in 2008 when there was a big recession. Everybody in the valley, it seemed, had decided that growing sweet corn would be a good way to make some extra money, and mine was a little bit late coming on. When it was ready to harvest and sell, I stopped at one of the many stands to see what the price was, and the lady says, $1 a dozen. I says, that costs that much to grow? And she says, I know, but you can't waste it after you got it grown. And I thought about it and told people in the ward they could come get sweet corn. And Kerry worked with a doctor who was also a bishop, and he says, I can get some. He says, I got people in my ward that they could use that. They need to can some corn or freeze some corn. At very least, they haven't had enough sweet corn this year. So he got come with a van, and him and his kids picked corn and filled a minivan with it. And that got most of what was right. And I know it was that year or the next year that Colleen come and got a bunch. The year after that, I found that the Bishop's storehouse would take sweet corn, and Carrie had gotten cancer by then, and I was just, all I got done was spend time with her, take care of her, sneak out for an hour or two, come back and check and see how she was doing, make sure I got some lunch and that she got lunch if she could eat it, take care of the boys, see if I could get them to eat something. And that went on for a couple of years, and then they come and told me Bishop Storehouse can't take it anymore. They won't allow private parties to donate, so I quit growing so much sweet corn. The last year I had it, it was a really good crop, and told the ladies in the ward they could come pick it, and there were 2 or 3 that come and picked sweet corn and canned and froze and had a good supply. But we bought the property that we built our house on, the 3 acres, from a guy by Merrill Blake. He had been a farmer in the area, and I was talking to him, and he says, well, how is it going? I says, well, I can grow it, but I can't seem to sell it. I says, and it's pretty difficult to give it away. And he says, yeah. He says, you can't get people to come pick it for it. I don't know how he understood that, but it seemed like he did. He'd been in business for years. Well, I found out the same year I decided I was going to go out on my own and have a landscaping business. He had done the same thing, but he just went to his boss, whom he was working for. He was doing landscaping mostly along highways, and then it expanded from Oklahoma into Texas, and then he got married and decided he wanted to move back to Idaho. When I went to his funeral, one of his good friends from Texas said, yeah. He said he called me when he sold that business. He called me and says, I got a check you need to come look at. And he says, that was something to behold. It was a check for $1 million. And he come back and built a 6,000 square foot home and farmed and built houses and did all kinds of stuff. But anyway, that was what happened to us here, and he died, and his wife still lives in the area, but the reason we could finally come to have a motor home is last fall, probably the end of October, both Riley and Jonathan were looking for apartments because they were getting married. Jonathan got married the Friday before Christmas, and Riley got married the Friday after New Year's. And I says to Carrie, I says, you know, one of them should rent our house and we should go to Tucson for the winter. Nikki had just started a new job 4 or 5 months earlier, and she couldn't get the time off to come to the weddings, and she was just heartbroken because she'd been planning on coming to their weddings ever since they were little. So that came when we told her. Riley said, yeah, we'll do that. And we talked to Doug and told her what we were thinking, and after 2 weeks he says, can we tell Nikki? He says, I need her help to find you an apartment. And so we did. And they found us an apartment, and we got there, and we just had to have our money and our paperwork, and we got there at 4 o'clock, and at 5:30 we were walking in the door. We stayed there for 6 months. Nikki's daughter graduated from high school, and we wanted to be there for her graduation, and so we stayed that long, and the price on the apartment was much better if we stayed 6 months, so we decided we could stay till July, and we did.
Does this need to be on?
No. Yeah, we're doing technical. You shut us off, did you? We're still there.
Can anyone hear us?
Can anyone hear us?
Yes.
We got to Tucson. We got to Tucson.
Yeah.
Found out that we could live.
If I'm on mute or not. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear you, Doug. We just thought maybe we better check in. We were getting some kind of feedback here. We found out that we could live in a 1-bedroom apartment of 600 square feet, and we were entirely happy. And if we worked at it just a little bit, we could keep it clean. 3 years ago, we had talked about selling our home and going on a mission, and then coming home and buying a smaller house when the boys were out of the house. They were both at college by then, and we realized that we didn't need so much space. So Riley and Michaela staged our house while we were gone so we could sell it. But that summer we worked, and we could get the kitchen clean, and then we'd start on the bedroom, and by then we needed to clean the kitchen, and the upstairs didn't get any attention, and the living room was piled full of stuff because we'd started to figure out what we wanted to keep and what we didn't, and the garage was stacked with stuff, and we talked to our neighbors about what our plans were, and so they sold their house and went on a mission.
They took our plan.
So sometimes you should not worry too much where the inspiration comes if you get it. I guess they did, and they're home now. And then we come back to Idaho and start planning for the future. But it was just uncanny how fast and how rapidly and how good we feel about it living in a motor home. Every time we've traversed from Idaho to Arizona, or Arizona back to Idaho, we passed the turnoff or Tooele and say Chanel's only 20 minutes that way.
Hey.
We passed Provo and said, well, Louise is just up off the freeway here about 10 minutes. and we knew that the 10 minutes wasn't bad. We just knew that if we stopped to visit, we wouldn't get to where we were going before midnight, so we just never have. Coming home, Carrie has been, some days she does really great and can just keep going, but usually the next day she needs to rest and take it easy for most of the day, and sometimes it's a little longer. Cancer, more than cancer, the chemotherapy does terrible things to your body. I guess she's in remission on the cancer, but on the way back we got early enough start. We left Tucson, and 3 hours later Carrie says, can we stay 2 days in St. George? Motels are cheap, we can afford that, and you can go visit Kim. So we got a motel, and when I got in I says, can we stay 2 nights? He says, oh yeah. He got all through, and he says the second night's a lot cheaper than the first one because you booked it through us. and so we stayed there 2 days, 2 nights, and I went to see Kim, and we got an early start and stopped to see Newell. He and Michelle are building a home about a quarter mile from her ex-husband's ranch, up towards, going up Spanish Fork and then turning at Thistle towards Ephraim and Manti. When we got there, he was troweling, using a power trowel on his garage floor. The walls were up, and he was ready to. He had some of the roof trusses on already, so we visited them for an hour or two, and then come on to Idaho. But now we can stop and see whoever we want to see for as long as they can stand us. We can find a place to park it and plug in, or we can find a place to turn the generator on and just dry camp for up to 3 or 4 days. So, do you have any more to add, Carrie?
Not that they can hear.
Yeah. Some things we don't want newlyweds to hear at this point. Oh. Probably for those who need to hear it mentioned, when Carrie and I had been, Connie and I had been married. No, Carrie and I had been married for 4 or 5 years, and Riley brought his kids out, and I took all the boys. Ionio. Well, Ionio and Riley are both smart, intelligent.
Yes, they are.
But his oldest son was hiking out after we'd backpacked into the Palisade Lakes up just below the Palisade Reservoir. He says, "Grandpa, how come you and Grandma Connie got divorced?" And this is something I'd rolled over in my mind for years already, and I was kind of surprised. I turned to him and I says, "Well, because we didn't communicate well, and we didn't communicate often, and we didn't understand each other and what each other's needs were, and we didn't work hard enough at meeting each other's needs to stay married, and we didn't communicate." And that was the first time I found any peace in understanding what had happened. But that basically was what had happened, what went on. Lambert made the observation that he says, you were never together on working on things together. He says you would be working hard on the marriage, and then you'd be so discouraged you'd give up, and Mom would work so hard on it she'd get discouraged and give up. He says it's just a lot of work to be married, and it is. But communication is essential, and meeting each other's needs is even more essential. But you got to communicate to do it.
And I won't let anything lie. I gotta get it figured out.
I don't know if it's an Andrus trait or a male trait to not want to talk about things that are hard to talk about right now. There will be a better time in the future.
Or to never apologize.
Oh, that's a big one. Both Connie and I came from perfect families who never did anything wrong, and I'm not sure either one of us thought apologies were necessary or even appropriate, but it just seemed to me like even if I did exactly what she wanted, she changed her mind so that it wasn't, so that I was still wrong. And it's really hard to always be wrong. The other thing I realized when these two youngest boys got married, we probably should be way out of their way and out of their hair while they were adjusting to being newly married. And I think that's important for all people. Connie married me, moved into the house across the river, the Brower house, with me, and she was part of a new family that she hadn't bargained for. That is really hard especially for women. Men just get up and go to work anyway, but it's hard for a woman to be that involved with a whole family at once, with hardly any privacy. And to compound it, there was one checking account that was for a farm and 3 families, so you can't spend anything until somebody checked to see if there was money in the checking account, and there usually wasn't. So there was you never knew what there was, and that was hard on 2 marriages that I know of. Anybody have any questions, observations?
This is Doug. I really appreciate the report, especially the last few minutes, the details you gave us there. I have a question for Carrie.
Okay.
When Clinton asked you to marry him, you said yes right away. How much earlier would you have? How many days, weeks, months earlier would you have said yes that readily? Had been asked.
About a month after we started dating. He was over at our house one night, and Nikki has always been my problem child. She was abused as a young infant, and so she was always the harder one. And one night Clinton was over there, and Nikki was having a hard time, and he just brought her into his lap and talked to her, and it was then the Spirit told me, he's the one. And I that's the night I fell in love with him, because so I was ready to marry him probably in October, and then I had to listen to him tell me he had to date other women for the next few months.
See,
Okay.
some things we're still working on here.
Yeah.
I don't need to date any other women.
We just found out, because we had each been in a marriage that didn't work out. I was a communicator. If Clinton was acting odd or doing things that I didn't understand or like, I talked to him about it. And it took me probably 24 years to get him to talk back. He's pretty good at it now. But he would never...
You've been trained now.
Yeah. Well, he's been taught. He was never wrong, because Andresses are always right. And and he never apologized for doing anything seriously. I mean, he'd say, "I'm sorry," but an apology is something that you show also. So he had to learn those things, but what he knew is that I loved him regardless through any of it. And that was new to him. And I also, the first few years we were married, he was so downtrodden, low self-esteem, that he just needed to know that he was loved and accepted. He's a great man. I'm very blessed. I think he's the one my patriarchal blessing told me I'd find. So.
Just a moment.
And we got 2 wonderful boys. So they never gave us a bit of trouble.
Good report.
Except Jonathan. What?
A very good report. I've got a question, but this one is for Colleen.
Okay.
Audrey would agree with what you just said about Andresses. Would Colleen agree with that? Andress man.
Colleen must be on mute.
I was just too far away from the speaker.
Oh,
Did you hear the question? Yes, I did hear the question. I think they're typical, yes. I probably agree with that, but we love them anyway, don't we, Carrie?
Yes. You know, nobody's perfect or they'd be translated. He had enough other qualities that showed me a promising future that he might learn. And he did.
we still think I might learn.
And of course, I have no issues. So, no.
If she does, she apologizes.
Well, I was raised to not say I'm sorry too often because my dad would agree with us. But when I really need to apologize, he knows. And when I was sick, he and the boys took such good care of me as much as I'd let him. Being a nurse, I wasn't real cooperative in a lot of things. But he took good care of me. And he still does.
Yeah. After cancer surgery and chemo, I was sure glad when she got the last chemo treatment because I figured one more would kill her. But she was almost dead then. And then there was pain and memory loss and no energy. She just couldn't get up. She'd go to the bathroom, get a shower, and find something to eat. And I'd do the laundry and get the meals, or coach Riley and Jonathan to get meals, and they learned how to do their own laundry and go wash dishes. And I had a truck farm that I'd escaped to, and they would do their homework and their housework, and neither one of them could be out very long before they had hay fever so bad they'd be back in the house anyway. So I guess that was kind of a blessing for them. But it took 4 years. At 4 years, Carrie got worse and worse and worse, and finally, it was the month of August. We went to the doctor every week, and the doctor says, I can't do any more. I don't have any more tricks. I don't have any more medications. You need to think seriously about managed care, and they need to get her medications regulated. She was on 2 pain medications besides the fentanyl patch, which I don't know if you can even get anymore. But she got and at the end of the month, it was Labor Day weekend coming up. It was Thursday night, and we'd gone to the doctor and got out of there about 5, and 6 o'clock the doctor called and says her potassium levels are dangerously low. She says, if you'll take her to the emergency room, I'll call them and tell her you come. Will you take her in? And I says, yes. And we talked about what we had to do to get her into managed care, and so I took her in, and at midnight they had run all kinds of scans and tests and put her in the hospital. And the next day I got there, and she was up and walking up and down the halls and feeling somewhat better, and they got paperwork started to find managed care that could handle her and take care of her. And the weekend came, and Saturday she was up and doing quite a bit better, and on Sunday went in, and the doctor says, I don't think we're going to need managed care. He says if she continues to do as well in the next 24 hours as she has the last 24 hours, she can go home. Friday night I'd come home and said to Riley, I says, looks like your mom's going to have to go to managed care. We might have to sell the house. I says, life's never going to be the same again. He said, okay. But our home teachers came in to see her on Sunday, and they'd been in our home several times during the previous 3 or 4 years. They couldn't believe the change. They were really, really surprised. Well, and so was everybody else that had known her.
Even Jason Dowling.
Yeah, Jason Dowling had to. He came in. He got called into the hospital just right after we'd got admitted to the emergency room, and stepped in and said hi. And the next time I saw him, he said, I can't believe the change.
Well, I was basically out of my mind.
Yeah.
I found out I never abused my medications, but the combination of them made me crazy. I saw snakes and bats and vampires and talking rocks and people camping out on our front step, and I knew that the neighbor girl was trying to seduce Riley and Jonathan, so I nearly drove Riley crazy. But they got my medication switched around, and I got off all my pain meds, and my mind, other than the memory issues, came back pretty good. So that's it.
Yep. Any other questions?
So Carrie, right now, do you feel healthy?
Not completely, but I still have very low energy. I get up and do things. I can do laundry and do some cleaning, but then I start hurting so bad I have to go lay down. So my oncologist told me I had fibromyalgia caused by the chemo. So I have chronic fatigue and chronic pain, but the pain is nothing like what it was on the chemo meds. So, but I couldn't manage an 8-hour day. It has to be broken up, and then some days I'm in bed all day. But I have a husband who loves me and accepts me, and if I need a nap, he's happy to lay down by me.
She has a husband who's now at the age where a nap does him a lot of good most afternoons, or mornings if it's morning.
Yeah. But I'm extremely happy with my life. I'm grateful for the cancer because it gave my family a lot. I wouldn't want to change it.
Would caution you should be careful what you pray for. For years we prayed that she would be able to stay home with her boys.
Yeah.
And the Lord answered our prayers. So if you want it bad enough, you get it. And maybe the worse you want it, the worse you get it. I don't know, but we're happy. Labor Day, she got out of the hospital, and it was like we were on a honeymoon for the next month. We just spent all of our time together. She seemed like she was back to her old self. Her energy level was way up. We just functioned a lot better. Well, I guess we've burned up another perfectly good hour.
Marianne and Clinton, I'm glad you reported that. Now I understand we're leaving this, so we're not having an official meeting next Sunday. Maybe we'll have one, but nobody's officially going to report. Does there anybody want to be on the docket for the near future, maybe the next week?
Well, maybe we're all meeting at Kenneth's for Brent's wedding, are we? Next week, next Saturday?
Saturday, yes. Well, some of us are.
Okay. We plan to be there with our home. At least in the area. At least in the area.
Okay.
We found out that's Jonathan's birthday, and we found out he's planning to go to Lava for his birthday.
And float the river.
Oh. Okay. Ken and Colleen, how many people are you expecting next Saturday?